Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to get started here on our latest LabChart Mastery Series webinar. This one is going to be covering macros. If you're not familiar with what macros are a feature in LabChart that allow us to automate different processes in LabChart outside of the scope of the normal things that you would use day to day. It's going to allow you to do things very customizable and things that you wouldn't normally see in some of the features that we have. So we're going to show you some examples. We're going to write some together, and we're going to show you some of the power of macros on the higher end. So before we get into the meat of our webinar here, we're going to talk about how the webinar works. All attendee audio is muted, so I won't be able to hear you during the presentation. However, you do have access to me through the GoToWebinar toolbar. In the questions area, if you have a question, type your question in there, and at the end of the presentation, I will go back and answer all the questions you guys might have. Before we get started on the subject of today's webinar, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we have going forward here in terms of other training options that you guys have. You'll notice here that our training calendar is vastly expanded. We're getting more and more of these training courses going forward. In the next 3 months, it looks like we have another. We've already had one in January, but it looks like we have another 6 coming up, including 2 in Dallas and 2 in Boston, 1 in Colorado Springs, and 1 in San Francisco. So if you're interested in these training courses, by all means, you should go to adinstruments.com/events. And what you're going to find in these LabChart training courses is essentially the same sort of subjects we're seeing today. Macros is definitely one of them. Except we're going to cover all of the features in LabChart as much as we can get in 2 days. We try and make these courses very specific to what you guys need to do, so the attendees will fill out some surveys and things beforehand, and we'll try and tailor everything that we do to specifically your needs. So if you're interested in learning more about LabChart, this is the greatest option we have for you. And as you can see, we have more and more people coming to these every time, so we're having to schedule more of these. So, seats are filling up, so I definitely encourage you, if you're interested in coming to one of these courses, contact your sales rep or just call us, and we can give you more information about what you're going to find in our on-site training courses. We also have some more webinars coming up. I just want to let you know about those. February 7th, we have multiple devices and device discovery. We have getting started with LabChart. That's going to be a very basic webinar. We're going to do things a little bit differently than what you might have seen in the past. We're going to go through things a little bit more quickly, but it's going to give us the ability to really touch on each of the different features that you might be interested in if you're sitting down with LabChart for the first time. So we're going to do that on February 19th. We're also going to cover some cardiovascular topics. We have PV Loop 2.0 that recently came out. If you didn't get to see that webinar, we have a recorded copy of it. You can contact us about it. We have PV Loop 2.0 and blood pressure that we're covering, and then we also have priming and operating your Radnati working heart system. So if any of you out there are working on a working heart system, we're going to be covering the way that we recommend filling and operating the different valves to get those things working in the right direction. So we're going to be covering that as well. The statement of intended use here, we just want to say this before going into what we're going to be talking about today. That is, AD Instruments products are intended for research and teaching applications only, and they are not intended to diagnose, treat, or monitor a human subject. Okay, that's what this statement of intended use is about. That being said, we do have the ability to connect our isolated front ends to humans, and they are rated safe for connection to human subjects based on the amplifiers. So some of our amplifiers have the body protected symbol. Some of them have the CF or cardiac protected symbol, which means that they can be connected to humans, provided there is no direct electrical contact to the heart in the case of the body protected symbol, or even if there is direct electrical connection to the heart in the case of the cardiac protected symbol. So we do have the ability to connect our equipment to human subjects for research purposes, and we do have certifications for that as well. We also operate under a quality management system. We manufacture all of our products under a system with ISO 9001 2008, and that's based on the design, manufacture, and sale of recording instruments. So, getting into the program of the webinar today, we're going to be going over some basic macro commands. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a file that's fairly straightforward. We're going to begin writing a very simple macro where we just find some peaks. And we are going to, while we're doing that, go through the different commands that we have available for us. So there's a lot of commands, more commands than we really have time to fully explain here. But we'll do our best to explain what the commands and different options are in the macros area. But I encourage you to explore those if you're interested in writing more macros. We'll also talk about an intermediate example. This intermediate example is going to be finding pulse transit time. And so we're going to go through that as well. We're also going to be talking about something that's fairly new, and that is event scripting. Event scripting is going to give us the ability to write macros that operate in real time. So based on events happening in real time, we can do some sort of action and run an entire script based on what we see happening in real time. And I'll give you an example. And we're going to get fairly advanced with that example. This will be the first time we actually get into some very basic scripting, but that's the idea behind event script, is that you have the ability to create a script that operates in real time on the software and gives you sort of and shows you a way that you can use the scripting in the background fairly easily. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to show you some examples at the end of some of the power of macros and really give you a rundown on some of the cool things that we can do with macros. So I'm going to switch over to LabChart here. And you guys should be able to see LabChart pop up here in just a second. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be writing a very simple macro, and that macro is simply going to go through, I'm going to make a selection here, and we're going to go through this selection and simply mark each of the peaks in this channel with a comment. It's a very simple macro, but one, and it's an example of one of the things that people use macros for a lot. But in the meantime, while I'm doing this, I am going to be showing you some of the other options that macros provide us. So to get started, I'm going to go to macro and start recording. Okay, that's usually the first step when we start recording a macro. So what the macro allows us to do is essentially it writes a script for us in the background. If we do what I just did, where I say macro start recording, what's going to happen is LabChart is then going to record all of the actions that I do while I'm recording this macro. So if I were to change the position of one of my windows, move things around, open a window, do any number of commands, LabChart will record that as text in the VB script. It is important to note that, and when I'm teaching this course with people in front of me, I'm doing this hands-on in the LabChart training course, one of the things I always warn about is to not ever make a click that I'm not making. And the reason I say that is because people get a little click happy, and they'll simply just click in the window, and that'll be recorded as part of their macro. So when we're doing this type of macro recording, we have to be careful that we are very deliberate in what we do with our mouse clicks and things like that. So again, to get started, we're going to go to macro, start recording. And as you can see here, this is what opens up as a little VB script window. And our VB script is going to be written in here as we do the rest of our macro. So what I want to do is I want to look at the recording commands now. So the recording commands tell us what they're specific to the actual macro. They're not commands that necessarily do anything. They're not normal commands that we would use on a day-to-day basis in LabChart. They're specifically for the macro. And what they will do is they give you the ability to wait, which means the macro, as it's going through its process, will wait a certain amount of time. And you'd use that in circumstances where you need to wait for a process to complete before you go on to the next step. That's often how we use it. You can play a sound or open a message. And we'll show you a couple examples of that a little later. The other options we have here are find all, repeat, repeat while in block, repeat while in selection, repeat select every, and repeat select each block. We're not going to take the time to go through all of these. We'll open a few of them up and show you what we're talking about with the way these work. But essentially, there are different ways of creating a repeat loop in LabChart, or in LabChart's macro feature. So if I open find all, for instance, find all, if you're familiar with our commands find command in LabChart, and that is a normal command, it's under commands and find, this looks exactly the same. Except for the difference is this goes directly into the macro and tells the macro to find all of the things that fit the criteria that you're putting into the find command here. So the different macro commands that we have here operate in the same way. So if I go to recording commands and I say find all, I can say find data, local maxima, 5% threshold, and that's what we're going to be looking for here in this. We're going to be finding every peak. So we're going to find data, local maxima, in our volume pulse channel with a 5% threshold. We're going to do a single point selection. This gives us some flexibility here in the find command on how we're actually going to be making selections, and I'm going to show you something that's a little bit different later when we do our second macro. But this is the function that we're going to be using. So I'm going to click Find. And you'll notice what happens. In our script here, we have written that find command. Okay, very simply. So this essentially writes the script in the background. We'll come back to this later. For now, I'm going to close this because I don't need it here while I'm writing a macro. But this just know that in the background, while we're doing these commands, the script is writing itself. So I'm going to discard this for now. We're going to kind of start over on this. We're going to go to macro, start recording. Okay, we're going to start over. Macro, start recording. Macro, recording commands, find all. And then we are going to find data, local maxima in this channel with a threshold of 5%, single point selection, that's good. And now when it finds all of the peaks, what we're going to do is we're going to go to commands, add comment, and mark it with a comment that says peak. That's what we need to do, and now we're going to click End Find, which ends the loop, okay, if that makes sense. So what we're going to say is, when we create a loop, what we're saying is, do this loop, meaning find all of these things. And every time you do, while you're doing this loop, I want you to do the next command that I do, and which I said was add this comment. Now, by clicking End Find, that means that's all the things I want you to do each time you find the thing I told you to find. Does that make sense? So what we've done is we said find all of these and add a comment. Okay. So what we should see, if we click Stop here, is our new macro options open here. We can name the macro Find Peaks. We can add a shortcut key to it if we want to. Okay. We can show it in a menu. So one of those menus is the macro menu, but you can put this in any menu you have available. So if you have the file, you want to put it in the file menu. If you write a macro that has to do with blood pressure, and you have the blood pressure module, you can put it in the blood pressure menu. Okay, so you can put it anywhere you want to. I typically leave them in the macro menu because it makes sense there. That's where your macros are located, but you can put them anywhere you want to. And you can also show them in the toolbar. If I click OK, you'll see that my macro is now here, Find Peaks. Okay, it's located in the toolbar. And this is the macro that was written. Okay. Closing this, we're going to talk about some of these other macro before actually, let's just run the macro first, and then I'll show you some of the other recording commands. So we're going to go to macro, find peaks, very simply, find all. Okay, so all of my peaks were found and marked throughout the entire file. Okay. So the other options we have here under macro recording commands, we have repeat. Repeat will repeat something a number of times that you specify. So let's start recording and then just kind of look at all these. So repeat something a specific number of times. If we go to repeat while in block, what that's going to do is simply it's a basic command, but what it says is recording commands, repeat while in block. What it's going to do is repeat all of the steps that you give it while that cursor of yours is still in your current block of data. So while your cursor is moving along doing the things you're told to do, until it hits the end, it's going to continue to repeat the same sequence that you give it. Repeat while in selection means that you would select something before you run your macro, and then it would repeat while it's still in the selection that you've given it. The other options here are repeat select every. This is going to look a lot like our multiply to data pad. Okay, so it gives you the option to repeat selections of time, comments, or event markers, and then do a certain number of commands after it finds those things that you're looking for. And then finally, we also have repeat select each block. That's going to repeat certain set of commands that you give it on each block. Okay. We also have wait while sampling, stop sampling, two different other features that you can put into your macros. So this is a very simple one that we wrote here. I'm going to get rid of this one. But that's a very simple one we wrote here called find peaks. Very simple. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to delete all of my comments because I don't want these anymore. And we're going to create an intermediate one. Before we do that, we're going to go into the macro menu. We're going to go to manage. And I'm going to show you where these macros are located. So your macro is here, obviously. You can also find it in the toolbar if you so choose. You can also go to manage, which gives you some more options for different macros. So one of the things that we can do here is we can actually open up our macro and edit it if we need to. And this is fairly important. And this is one of the first things that I teach people in the course when we've written a macro, because if I have 12 people in the course, usually somebody will miss a step or something when we're trying to teach a macro. And we'll take that opportunity to go into their text and actually find the error and change it automatically. So if you can go in here, one of the first steps, if you're going to start getting into writing macros, one of the first steps I urge is just to look at it every now and then. Because a very simple macro, you can sort of tell what's going on. Even if you have no idea what these scripting language stuff, what this means, you can sort of tell what's going on. For instance, we have these comments that says move the insertion point to the beginning of the file. It says do while, and then this is your find command, begin find. And if you remember all of the different options that you chose, your channel index tells you which channel you're in. Your find data noise threshold tells you what that noise threshold was. You found a local maxima. So all of these things are sort of listed here. You can very easily, if you just look at it a little bit, you can tell that this is the noise threshold. If you need to change that, you can. You can go in here and modify that. So if you have a simple macro, it's fairly straightforward to go in and just sort of look at it. Other options we have here in the Manage menu, and again, we got there from going to Macro and Manage. It's where we find all the macros that are in our file. We also have example macros. Okay, these macros are built into LabChart that give you the ability to see some other options, some other things that we've put in there that give you some ideas about what you can do with macros. Macros are, I would say, they're clearly the most powerful feature when you think about the sheer number of things you can do with macros. Because VB script and the script that we're writing is a Windows native language, you can do things like control other softwares. You can do a huge number of things just because of that part of the feature. So we give you some examples of how you can find, how you can do certain things. You can go in and you can click edit. Edit the macro does the same thing I did before where I opened it up. You can click new, and we'll do this later. Okay, we're going to write a macro from scratch, which is something I normally don't teach, but we're going to show you a simple example with an event script that we're going to write one from scratch. We can delete the macro, obviously. You can go to the properties. You can change the name. You can change the menu it's in and do all of those things. You can also import or export a macro. If you export the macro, it's going to be save it as a VB script file. If you import the macro, you can find another macro, for instance, I know that this one has a macro already written in it, or a number of these do. If I open that, I can import a macro, okay, from another file. Import, there it is. There's my new macro. Okay, so you can import those from other LabChart files, and you can export them as VBScript files. So this is what we have here in Find Peaks. What we're going to do now is we're going to write an intermediate example, and that intermediate example is going to find pulse transit time. Pulse transit time, in the case of this file, we're going to show that as being the time difference between the R wave on this ECG to the blood flow pulse measurement that we have in channel 2. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a simple macro, or an intermediate macro, and what we're going to start off again with macro start recording. Okay. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Window and Datapad and make sure that we get the datapad in the proper order to get the information that we want. So what we're going to be doing with this macro is we're going to be making a selection just like this one, selecting from the ECG to the blood flow. So the information we want to know about this is, let's say, we want to know the time it came from. So we're going to get time. We want to know the selection duration. Okay, so the selection duration is going to give us the time difference between that ECG R wave and the blood flow pulse. And we'll be happy with that. That's fine. So let's use our Smart Tile feature and get both our datapad and our chart view next to each other. Now, we're going to start our macro. We're going to go to Macro, Start Recording, and our text popped up. We don't really need to look at it, so I'm going to close this for now. Now, usually what I do in a macro, especially if I'm going to be analyzing the entire data file, what I'll do first, we're going to go to Macro. Sorry, we're going to do something else. We're going to go Macro, Start Recording, obviously, because we're going to start recording our macro. We're going to go to Commands, Find. We are going to go to the start of the file, and that's usually my first command for the macro. So we go to Commands, Find, go to the start of the file. And the reason is because the Find command, what we're using here, is moving the cursor. Okay? If I'm going to find all of these things throughout the entire file, I need to start all the way to the left at the start of the file and then move to the right to find the things I'm looking for. So I'm going to move that cursor to the beginning of the file. Now I'm going to go to Commands, or Macro, Recording Commands. So what I'm going to do here is now that I'm going to tell the macro, now that I've gone to the beginning of the file, so that's the first step I want it to do. Now I'm going to tell it that I want it to repeat the following commands. And I'm going to use the Repeat While in Block option. So it's going to repeat while I'm in this current block all of the commands that I give it. So if I click this button here, it says Current Script Command Repeat While in Block. So now I know while this is open, now I know that the following commands that I'm going to give this macro are going to be repeated. Okay? So I'm going to give it the commands I want it to repeat. The first command is going to be to find the ECG R wave. I'm going to go to Commands, Find. I'm going to find data, local maxima in the ECG channel. I'm going to go to a threshold of 10%, and I'm going to do a single point selection. If I click Find here, it should do the command that I want it to do. There. Now I'm going to go to now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the peak in my blood flow channel. So I'm going to go to Commands, Find data, local maxima in the blood flow channel, and I want to select all channels. So what we're going to do with this now is it's going to move to the right. You can see here it's going to move to the right. It's going to find the peak in the blood flow channel, and it's going to, instead of making a single point selection, it's going to select to the previous point. And so what that means is from the point that it's at, the previous point, to the new point, it's going to make a selection. Okay, so that's the idea, is we're making a selection to the previous point. We'll click Find. it made our selection. Now I want to go to Commands, Add to Datapad. So that's my repeat loop. I'm going to click End Repeat. And I can stop recording a number of ways. I can open my script back up. My script is down here. I can click Stop here. Or I can go to Macro, Stop Recording. Name this PTT for Pulse Transit Time. Click OK. And we should have a functional macro. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Macro, run our PTT macro. And it should go through and find the time difference between the R wave and the blood flow pulse. And that is right. I've done this 100 times. So everything worked out great. And our macro is written. So that's an example of an intermediate macro with a few more steps involved. And we're able to find the time difference between 2 points automatically throughout an entire file. Now, what we're going to do next is we are going to write an event script macro. So this is fairly, like I said, this is fairly new. This feature came out a few months ago at this point. But what we're going to do with this is I'm going to open a file here that gives me the ability to write an event script. So we're using our playback feature. I'll show you something here. We're using our playback feature. You can see some of the data coming in there. And with this playback feature, I am going to write a macro that does a number of things. Okay. The first thing that it's going to do is each time it crosses this guideline, we're going to add a comment. Okay. But that's not all. We're going to get more advanced than that because I want to show you some of the cool things you can do with event scripts that may not be readily apparent if you simply just try and write an event script. Okay. So we're going to try and get pretty deep into these. So we're going to go and we're going to go to Macro and Manage. Right now we don't have any macros in this. What we're going to do with event scripts is we're going to write these from scratch. We're going to go to New. And instead of a simple macro, we're going to click on Event Script. And we're going to write an event script from scratch. We're going to name it. Marking and Analysis. Because we're going to do both in this macro. So here's my macro. If I click OK, this is what opens. Okay, so you'll notice that what we get is a blank macro or blank script writing area that basically tells us the script will wait for LabChart events to occur, calling any event handlers you have implemented in this script, drag handlers for LabChart events you're interested in. Okay. So what that means is it's going to open up and it's going to show us these events. Now, before I put an event in here, I want to mention this little area on the right in the script writing area. What we have here first is all the event commands. These are the events that LabChart can find in real time. So events, find event data arrived. And if you're not familiar with what events are things created by, say, cyclic measurements can find events. And many of our modules can find events. So when those events occur or are marked, LabChart figures that out and sees that that happened and does something based on the timing of that happening. We can also wait for a digital input to change. We can wait on an external trigger or stimulus. When a comment is added, we can do something. When certain keys are pressed, we can do something. So there's a lot of options here. Other things we can look at here are the different functions in LabChart. So if you're attempting to write a macro from scratch, this is a great thing to look through. By no means is this comprehensive in all the things you can do in LabChart, but if you want to figure out how you can write a macro to do something, it's pretty straightforward to look through these commands. And you can see that if I click on the sampling one, I can say sampling record. And on most of these commands, if you click on them, you can see a little description of what that command does and what the command is. And if you just click and drag that command into the macro, that's what goes in. Okay, and we don't want to do that, so delete that. But if you just drag that command in, that's a very simple way to get into the basics of writing scripts in LabChart. Is you can find these commands, you can drag that in there, and the command is there. So you don't necessarily have to record it in the classic fashion that we did. Without getting too far off what we're doing here in the event script, now I'm going to write my macro. So what I want it to do is on guideline crossed, I want it to do something. Each time that this data here in channel 2 crosses the guideline, I want it to do something. So we're going to do a very simple version of this first. We're going to do on guideline crossed, and we're going to look in the pulse rate channel. And once we've done that, you'll see that some different commands came up here. And you can see that there is a comment here that says add your commands here, which is what I'm going to do. Now, so you can see here that what we did was on guideline crossed. We drug that in. We have the different things that come up here, and we have the little prompter that tells us we need to put our commands in there. And what I'm going to do, my command is going to be to add a comment. Okay, so we're going to go to comments. We're going to do comment at end. You can see that command is in there now, and now my comment is going to be crossed. Okay, so there's my macro. That's pretty easy. We're going to get more complicated with it, but we need to show you how this one works first. So I'm going to close this. My macro should still be in there. There it is, marking and analysis. We're going to run the macro and hit start. And each time we cross guideline, we have our comment. Okay, you can see something happened here, though, that we put the comment in channel 1, which isn't a terribly big deal, but we can fix that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to manage. Actually, first what we need to do is stop the macro. So we're going to stop that macro. We're going to go to macro and manage, open this thing back up, and we're going to make some changes. You can see here that this is the channel number first. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to, just so you know, when you're writing macros, the channel indexes are the channel number -1. So this is saying I want to add a comment to channel 1 with the word crossed. But what I'm going to do is change that to channel 2 or channel index 1. Just so you know, if you're trying to call a channel in a macro, the index is 1 less than the channel number, so you know. Okay. So the other thing that I want to do here is now, this is great. We've added our comments each time we cross the guideline, but I want to do something a little bit more advanced with you guys. So what you'll notice is in our subroutine here in the guideline crossed area, we have some different functions that are given to us, or variables that are given to us by that subroutine or by this function that we added to the macro. And one of those things is rising. So what that means is for our guideline crossing, we have something that tells us if we're crossing in a positive direction or is rising across the guideline. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a very simple scripting technique. Now, I need to preface this by saying, you know, in many cases, you know, we're not going to help you out. We're not going to be able to help you out that much with scripting, but we know some simple things we can help you out with. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if is rising, then, and we're going to do a different comment. So if is rising, that means if we are crossing this guideline in a positive direction, then we're going to add a comment that says too high. Then we are going to add a different comment if it's going down. That is just right. And there is a simple routine that gives us the ability to separate the difference between rising above this guideline and going below this guideline. So now if I run my macro and click Start, you should see a difference between rising and falling. There's too high, there's just right. too high. There's just right. Maybe a second. All right. So that's cool. So we separated that. Now what I want to do is something a little bit more advanced even. And we're going to show you one more thing in this macro. So what I've done, we're going to stop this macro. What I've done here is I'm going to go to the data pad and make sure that data pad's set up properly so that I can, there we go, perfect. Data pad set up right. What I'm going to do is show you how, we have a lot of different ways you can analyze your data in real time. But what we're going to do is, sometimes when people are recording data, they don't necessarily like the way, say, timed at the data pad makes a selection while you're recording it, and turns things black, gets in the way. So what we're going to do is we are going to run a routine that will automatically analyze our data, and it will automatically analyze our data after we're done recording. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple things in here. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to do a multiple add to data pad. It's going to analyze our entire file when it's done recording, and then we are going to open the data pad and then show it. Okay, so we're going to do a few things here. And so one of the easy ways to do this, okay, while you're writing a macro, and you can see that we're writing this macro sort of just writing it out. One of the easy ways to add a command, you can add a command by going into the functions, dragging it in, right? But the other thing you can do is you can click this record button and then just simply give it the command you want it to give it. So I'm going to go to Commands, multiple at the data pad. I'm going to add all of the data through the whole file to the data pad. Click OK. There's our multiple at the data pad. And then I'm going to open the data pad, Window, Data Pad. And then I am going to go to Smart Tile. We'll click Smart Tile. Okay. So we're going to stop recording. So remember, I was recording all that. You could see it was writing those different features. Now, I have those commands, but what I'm going to do with those commands is I'm going to copy them and move them outside of my, so this routine here is my routine for on-guideline crossed. What I'm going to do is put this on its own. I just copied it. I'm going to put this on its own. And I'm going to put it on its own when sampling stops. So when we're done recording, we are going to do those commands that I just created. Okay. Oh, I messed that up. That's okay. I work on a Mac normally, so I did Apple. That didn't work. So I did Apple copy. So we're going to do that again. We're going to record. We're going to do our commands, multiple at the data pad. Click OK. We're going to Window, open the data pad, and then we're going to go click on Smart Tile. Stop recording. Okay. So that should work. When we're done recording, we're going to do those steps. Okay. So we're going to run our macro again. We're going to click Start. It's going to mark everything. And this should stop recording here in just a second. And this data file isn't terribly long. So it should stop on its own here in just a minute, and it should do those steps that we gave it. Run our multiple at the data pad, analyze everything, open up the data pad, and now we have all of our data here. Okay. So pretty cool option there to go through and analyze all of your data automatically after you stop recording and give it automatic marking. We've put the comments here from all the different parts. I'm going to close the macro so you guys can see this. And open up the data pad a little bit further. We have our time, we have our mean heart rate, and we have our comment. Okay, a very easy way to automatically go through and analyze your data at the end. Okay, so hopefully you guys got a pretty good handle on that. But the idea behind event scripting here, if we go just take a look at this again, event scripting gives us the ability to find something we want to monitor, whether it be when recording stops or on guideline crossed, and then do some steps there in between. Okay, so hopefully you guys got a good rundown on that event scripting and how it works. We find that feature to be really cool. It kind of opens up a lot of the things that we can do in real time. It gives us a lot of flexibility. Okay, so that's event scripting. And what I'm going to do for the rest of the presentation here is just go through some of the other things that we have as examples, okay? Show you some of the other things you can do, some of the power of macros. So here is a simple, what we call a pharmacology macro. Now I don't have, we'll do something else here. I don't have a Power Lab connected, so what I need to do is get it to, well, it won't work that way. That's okay. So we're going to do something else because I don't have a Power Lab connected, so that's why that one didn't work. We're going to do sleep scoring file with macro. This is a very simple one that's going to go through. It's based on some arithmetic calculations. It's just going to go through and mark all of these things as awake, non-REM sleep, or REM sleep. Very simply, it's just going to go through each of these channels, the W, NREM, and REM channel, and mark everything accordingly. Okay, so we're going to go to macro scoring. It's just going to go through, mark everything. You can see it's marking it with awake, no score, NREM, or REM sleep. Okay, so it's going to go through the whole entire file and do it that way. Okay, very simple way to automate your analysis. Okay, some of the other things we have for analysis are, one more example here is maybe something with messages. Okay, so let's do something with messages. So what I mean by messages, let's run our first macro. So select baseline noise. What I'm going to do is select some baseline here. It's going to wait 10 seconds, and then it's going to give me another option, or it's going to give me another command what the next step is. Okay, so there's some baseline data. Now it says calculating noise level. There's our noise level. Finding our threshold. There is our threshold. Select data to be analyzed. It's going to take 10 seconds to do that. So in showing you this, you can do something like give users instructions on how to do the analysis. So now I'm going through. I've selected and created all my comments, and now I have another feature that allows me to analyze where those comments are, or analyze something based on those comments. It's a pretty cool macro. We have another example here that allows us to find an index of baroreflex sensitivity. Okay, so one way we do that is we'll just make a selection of the whole thing. This looks like part of it was already analyzed. So we're going to analyze this area. We're going to go to macro. We're going to go to mark. So what we're going to do is it's going to go through and mark this. So if you're not familiar with a baroreflex sensitivity index, what it's doing is it's going through and finding the number of intervals that are increasing or decreasing in a row, a number of intervals, and systolic blood pressure, I believe. Yeah, find those that are increasing in a row. You can see that it found a number of those, and then you can go through and analyze that as well. So different options here that you have for using macros, but we have a wide range of things that we can do. And another, we don't have Outlook available on this computer, but what I want to show you here with this one is a macro that actually can control Outlook. Okay, this would give you the ability to send yourself an email if something specific were happening during your recording. You could monitor, say, blood pressure going too high, and if that were the case, you could send yourself an email that tells you what's happening with your data without you actually being there. So really cool. You can control other different pieces of software like that as well. So that's really what we wanted to show you today. Some different options and different features in macros, some different things you can do, and some of the new things you can do. So at this point, that's what we really wanted to get through and show you guys. So if you have any questions, please use the questions bar in the GoToWebinar toolbar. And what I'm going to do is answer your questions. There's a number of them here already. So, so are there limitations to the speed of the computer for running event script macros? I'm probably not entirely qualified to answer that question, but I imagine there will be some. The speed at which your computer runs is going to be the speed at which you can run that script. Now, those scripting, things that we're offering in LabChart are not incredibly, intensive unless you're creating a, huge macro. I wouldn't anticipate that if you having a relatively slow computer, if it can run LabChart, I imagine that, the event scripts that we're running are going to be just fine. So that's something to keep in, it's something to, keep in mind, but I wouldn't imagine you're going to have too many problems with it. So there is another question here for very long experiments. Is there a way to run a macro that automatically saves the data to the data file? There is. So what you can do is, let's just open a brand new file, and I'll just go to macro, manage. Let's do a new simple macro, and I'm just going to show you that command. So that command would be, now what you probably have to do if you wanted to do this is, we'll try that. We'll actually do this here. So here is File and Save. Okay, so I'm going to save this on the desktop. File, Save As. This is going to be Test. While we're recording, save. Okay, so that does work. So what you have to do, if I stop that, we can even look at it to make sure it worked. There's my test. And there it is. Okay, so that works. So based on something that's happening or a given amount of time, you can use the wait command to use it. So depending on what you want to do with it, there is that save option in there. Somebody asked about the differences with Mac. There are significant differences with Mac. You can write macros on Mac. What I do need to mention, though, is that a lot of the options for editing that script at this point, coming in here and editing this script, are not available on the Mac at the moment. So you can still do some of the macros where you start recording and then you do a bunch of commands that the macro can follow that you're doing. But the difference is at this point you can't go in and edit those macros. The next question we have here is it possible to use a macro to create a change in sound frequency proportional to voltage level? I'm imagining what you're saying is that based on what you're seeing in a channel, can you change the sound frequency? That might be something we have to talk about separately. I imagine that you could do that. Now, there could be two things you're talking about here. I don't know if you're talking about a sound that you're actually creating, that you're playing to someone. If you're talking about a sound, there's actually a feature that will do this without a macro. That feature is called audio output. And I don't think I have it set up here, but you can use audio output to do that. Audio output should give you the ability to change a sound that you're playing out based on what you're seeing in a channel. Now, that being said, if you wanted to do it based on, something you're sending out in terms of a stimulator, you could do that as well with a macro. So I guess we have a comment here on it. Used to tell if you penetrated a neuron or potential went down. Yeah, the best way to do that is to use audio output. That would be a great way to do it. You can find that it's an extension of the software. You can find it free on the website. If you just go to 80instruments.com and you go to downloads, you can find the audio output extension. And what it will do is it will change the frequency based on the potential that you're seeing. So it's a very simple way to do it. And that is, again, based on what the channel of interest is doing, it'll play a different sound. So you can definitely do that, but it's easier to do it with audio output than it is with a macro. So the next question we have here, is there a webinar about simple and event scripts for PV loops? Not specifically, but if you have questions about writing macros involving PV loops, you can definitely just ask us, and we can show you get you started, head in the right direction anyway. You can look through the commands here, and you can see the options that are available if you're interested in looking at that. You can see throughout the document we don't really have for the modules options there. So unfortunately, for the modules and analysis, you're not going to see too many options for doing things in macros, but it depends on what you want to do. It's a hard question to ask. So I would recommend you call us, either myself, I'm Brandon Boucher, or David Ream. He is our technical support engineer in-house, and we can help you out with any questions you have without being more specific regarding the event scripts for PV loops. So the next question is, will this webinar be available afterwards? Yes, it will be available afterwards. We'll post these videos online, and if you are interested in this, we should send you a link to it afterward automatically, but if you don't get that, just contact somebody here about it, and we'll send you a link to the website we host those on. We will put those online later for everyone to see. Next question we have here is, can we auto-scale or fix the scale with a macro? Yeah, I do believe we can. Let's record something here, and let's change the scale. So anytime I change the scale, plus, minus, auto-scale, all of those are written into a macro. So you can absolutely change the scale with the macro. Next question here is, I would like to create a macro that takes data from Excel or access of environmental oxygen levels during a period of time, and then use these values to set points that PowerLab would use to control external devices that maintains oxygen levels within these set points. I do believe that's something that's possible. Now, I'm not entirely sure how to do that. I'm not that good. I have done things with PowerPoint before. We've done things with Excel before. Now, what that would require is being able to open the Excel file, find the correct cells in the Excel file, assign those to variables within our script, and then do things based on that. Now, in my head, I can imagine a way to do that, but I don't know enough about writing DB script for Excel to tell you how. But I do believe that's something that would be possible. If you're interested in learning more, I do want to tell you guys one more thing here. If you're interested in learning more about macros, you have questions about macros, one great way for you to get help on that is to go to our software forum. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here with the software forum. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to go to the software forum right here. This is our software forum, forum.avinstruments.com. This is a great way to ask macro questions. I will answer some of these, so will David here in the U.S., but people all over the world answer these questions, including our developers and programmers. So this is a great way to get answers to your specific macro questions. Of course, you can always just ask me or David, but in the case like this with Excel, where things might be a little bit over my head as far as the macros are concerned, this is another way for you to get information about that. Now, like I said, I believe you could do something like that with Excel, but I wouldn't know off the top of my head exactly how it can be done. Okay, at the moment, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming. It was, I hope this was very useful. I know it was a lot of information, but you can rewatch this online later on. So if you want to, again, lots of ways you can get more information on macros. I hope that you guys, give this a shot. You can really do a lot of things with macros, and we're really proud of what we were able to do here. So thank you again for coming, and we will see you again next time.